Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Wednesday Axon Bulletin. It is 12:30. You have reached hump day in the middle of the week. It's all downhill to the weekend from here. And starting that journey with me today is Amy Canavan. Amy, how's it going?
All right, Colin, can you hear me?
Yes, we had some technical issues before we came on air, but we're glad that we've got them resolved. So, Amy, this is a bit of breaking ground here on A Celtic State of Mind. We're going to have some input from some contributors later on. We've got 4 lined up today, and if you're looking to get involved in this, which we'll be doing weekly on a Wednesday going forward, then reach out to Paul, reach out to A Celtic State of Mind on Twitter, all the avenues that you have to get in touch. And if you want to get your point across, you can also do it daily in the comment section. But if you want to join us on a Wednesday, get in touch with Paul and we'll arrange that going forward next week. We will shortly introduce our first contributor today, who is a face that you will be familiar with. It's Kevin McCluskey. Kevin has joined us a couple of times on a Wednesday, and as this is the trial, we're having Kevin come in as our first one today. He was telling me before we came on air that his wife's on the babysitting duty, so we might see another rogue contributor coming in the background. But there's plenty to talk about today, just like there always is in the world of Celtic. I mean, it's now been 70 days, Amy. 10 weeks ago since Neil Lennon left the club. Now, we were just about to come on air 10 weeks ago when the news broke. I mean, you think back as far as that. 10 weeks sounds like a long time, but it's completely flew by, hasn't it?
Oh, it really has. It's like when your school holidays flying and they're over in a flash. That's what it's been like. 10 weeks. It's unbelievable. And has anything really changed? Well, you tell me.
Well, I think we will be discussing that later on with one of the contributors who will join us. We'll also be discussing, should Celtic keep Ryan Christie? Now, that's almost like my trigger word, Ryan Christie. Although I did shock Amy a couple of weeks ago when I suggested that Ryan Christie could come back in to the first team. And yeah, that was the response I got then. And do you know what? It's now came out that he's got 6 months left on his deal, but we will have Alan Morrison coming on to explain why we should have Ryan Christie here for the foreseeable future, which will be an interesting one. We'll also have some other people getting involved, and as I said, if you'd like to get involved next week, then get in touch with Paul and we can certainly arrange that going forward. But let's move on and let's get our first guest in. He's coming all the way from Hungary. So it's great to have him joining us today. Welcome to the Bulletin, Kevin McCluskey. Kevin, how's it going?
Yeah, not bad, Colin. Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's good to have you on today. And Kevin, you are the first guest on the Axom dial-in, phone-in, whatever it's wanted to be called. So what would you like to discuss today?
Yeah, I would like to kind of discuss the fan engagement element from Celtic this season. So I think we all know that it's been a kind of unmitigated disaster of a season on and off the pitch for Celtic, but the kind of PR-wise, we haven't done ourselves any favour at all with fan engagement, or really the complete lack of it. Especially, as you say, 70 days since Lennon's gone, there's been no real communication from the board as to what moves we're making to get a new man in place. So, linking in as well with what's going on down in England just now with the fan pressure groups rising up following the European Super League. You've got Liverpool talking to the spirit of Shankly. You've got Chelsea bringing in fans to board meetings now. Really just kind of want to raise that and see what do you think Celtic can do that way to get fans back on side and to engage more with the support and actually make us feel more a part of the club again and kind of involved in the decision making going forward.
Amy, it's something we've discussed on the Bulletin a number of times this year, is the disconnect between the fans and the club. Going on Kevin's point, what could be done going forward to sort of bring the togetherness of the board and the club together? the fans, together.
Oh, yeah, as Kevin said, every day that John Kennedy is in the role, that gap is getting bigger and disconnect is getting larger, because it's just another day, another hour, another minute that the club aren't connecting with fans. And there's been ample opportunities for them to get in touch. Just, we've said it time and time again, just that, yes, we are in search of a manager, we are still looking, and keep it as simple as that. Then you look at the model, I think it broke maybe last night, but Chelsea, how they're going to think from July, I think it is, that they're going to be bringing in fans, and maybe that is something that Celtic would need to be doing. It needs to be something quite colossal like that. I know maybe a year ago we'd be saying, wow, that's quite drastic, there's no way Celtic would do that, but the disconnect that has transpired this season and that has grown and is continuing to grow, it needs to be something that big. A simple message, oh, we love you, whatever it may be, that won't be enough. The fans can see past that now. As I've said, there have been so many opportunities for communication, and there has been nothing. We can't even say a lack of communication now. There has quite simply been none at all. So it needs to be something large, I think, along the scales of what Chelsea are trying to implement, and maybe see how it works with them first. I don't know, but it needs to be something, I think, similar to that, a big move, because maybe something that the board and the club would have thought maybe would have appeased the fans over the last years. They won't get away with that now, because this season it's been breaking point, hasn't it, in so many aspects, and I think especially for fan engagement as well.
I think it was very telling when you took a look at what happened over the weekend. Now, obviously, there was the sort of boycott of social media in support of the movement across football and across sport, and then the first message that comes out of Celtic from that was about a fixture rearrangement. And that was the fact that the St Johnstone game, which is the game where everyone's to submit banners and pictures for Scott Brown for his final farewell, the last song, as it's been said on Twitter, that was the thing that Celtic messaged about. Never mind the reaction from the players, from the management for what happened on Sunday. The disgrace of what was Sunday afternoon. Never mind the fact of, here's an update on what's happening at the club. Or, we've been told that you're meant to submit banners and submit jerseys that can be put around the stadium for the Scott Brown thing, and we were told that we would be given an update as to how to do that. Now, that game's next Wednesday. There's nothing on that. We had the women's team had a fantastic 8-0 victory over Forfar for Farmington at the weekend. We didn't even hear about that. The first thing that Celtic tweeted out was a fixture arrangement. To me, I was only surprised that it wasn't a happy birthday announcement. Because that's the way that Celtic seem to go this season. Now, Eddie Gribbin's coming in here saying, how many fans have called for an update or an announcement or anything from the Celtic board? Completely ignoring the fans' request is disgusting. We are Celtic, the board are a disgrace. Now, it's a really bold statement there from Eddie, and a lot of Celtic fans will definitely agree with a lot of what's been said. Now, the one person this always seems to come back to, and Kevin, I'll be interested to get your views on this, is it always comes back to the SLO, John Paul Taylor. Now, it's a man that's been in his job since July 2013, and probably right up until this season, was generally there for kind of simple requests from the fans. It was always a case of, my supporters bus needs a bus pass for the park. How can you get it? John Paul Taylor will sort it out. I'm looking to get a signed top. John Paul Taylor will help you put it in the right direction. But this season, it's come down to the points of, we needed him to feed back to the board that it was a disgrace that Lennon was kept in his job for so long. It's a disgrace the way that the board have treated the fans. And I feel as if his role this season went from just being that sort of go-to to help out fans to almost the middleman between the fans and the board, and that must have been a really difficult position to find himself in.
Yeah, I think it would be. I think the role of the SLO is hugely important, especially at a club like Celtic. I can't for the life of me understand why we've only got the one, because we're a massive club with a massive support base, and I've got so much sympathy for John Paul Taylor and the job that he's been forced into doing this season. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't envy him this year having that role.
Yeah, and Amy, one of the points that was brought up when Eddie said there is the lack of communication from the club. Now, I also take a really keen interest in ice hockey, and I support the Glasgow Clan. Now, they haven't played a match since February 2020, it would have been, sorry. They've not been able to play a game. But every month we get a statement from the club saying this is what's happening, this is what we're planning to do going forward. In fact, there was a statement came out today saying that they're looking to buy Braehead Arena as to be the permanent home of the team. Now, we get updates all the time from who is the general manager, Gareth Chalmers, at the club. Now, this is a team and a organisation that are far less professional than what Celtic are, and yet they're still able to keep that fan base in tow. They're able to keep the fans updated on what's going on behind the scenes, and it's as simple as a 500-600 word letter or statement that goes out. That's not a lot to ask from the Celtic board, is it?
No, it's not, and I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think everything this season has been pretty unprofessional. We talk about statements. Even you can go back to that Dermot Desmond interview. That wasn't very professional, was it? Or it was perhaps too professional, and it was so scripted. So who knows? It's all these little things are all adding towards it. So as you say, believe me, 500-600 word statement, it's not a lot, and that's kind of what I touched upon earlier. It's not even really the lack of communication now. It's becoming non-existent. As you say, if it's not a birthday announcement or a fixture amendment, it's constant, and it's all I've seen to say all season. But read the room, and there has been a severe lack in reading the room.
Yeah, and just the point coming up here from you and Stars, don't get why a big club like Celtic have been silent for so long. That's the point I was just making. I mean, my ice hockey team are able to put statements out like that. Surely Celtic can turn something around in a couple of hours. They need to get their finger out and announce Eddie Howe soon, or supporters won't bother getting a season ticket for next year. Now, Kevin, see, when I look at that, to me, I think the next big statement that comes out of Celtic Park is either going to be the managerial announcement or the fact that the season books are on sale. Now, when you look at it, most teams across Scotland now have put out their season book packages for next year. Certain ones are doing refunds depending on how many tickets are sold. I know that's the story up in Aberdeen. I think if they sell 15,000 season tickets, then they'll get about £200 back or something like that on the cost of their book. Celtic now know that they can show the games on the Path to Paradise, with the deal being agreed with Sky Sports. I mean, it's the question will come up, Kevin, what comes first, the managerial announcement or the season book sales? Because the longer this goes on, I think it's going to be the latter.
Yeah, it really should be the managerial announcement, because that's the big one, that's the monkey off the back kind of thing. We need to get that resolved, and that gives the fans the confidence for next season. If you announce the season books before that, it's the old one of it, you don't know what you're buying for next season. It's a lot of money to invest on a promise of Eddie Howe when it could turn out to be Jack Ross, and no one's going to be happy with that. And you'll feel like, once again, you've been cheated out your money and taken for granted by the club. So for me, the next big announcement has to be the manager, and it's got to be a big one.
Yeah, and Amy, this all goes back to what Kevin first was speaking about, is the fan engagement. We mentioned that Chelsea have now got fans on the board. We spoke about the role of John Paul Taylor. Now, this is going to be the biggest season I think Celtic have had in a long time in trying to shift these season books. Where do you think the fact that the gap between the information that's coming out from the boardroom and the fans, that's going to have a detrimental effect on sales unless something actually changes and you do see the appointment of a figure like Eddie Howe at the club?
I think that goes without saying. You can see the comments coming in as well, and as both you guys have touched upon, the announcement of a manager has to come first. I think everybody on this bulletin has said so over the past 10 plus weeks. It's definitely been more than just these 10 weeks. So it has to, because as Kevin says, if it's the other way around, you don't know what you're signing up for. What are you paying all this money to see? So it's a tricky one as well. The club, say the sales aren't there, the club will obviously, there'll be a deflection on COVID, and there's no doubt obviously COVID will come into play with a lot of people, but there is going to be something there if there is a lack of communication, and I can see it having a detrimental effect, and I think anyone can, because as Kevin said, then it's so simple, but if it's not the managerial announcement first, quite simply, what are you signing up for?
Exactly, and Scott Mackay comes in basically saying the same thing. Can't justify giving this board another penny of my money. Breaks my heart as I've had a season ticket for 20 years. The board have made it clear how they feel about the fans, and I think one of Dominic Mackay's biggest tasks will be to try and rebuild any sort of relationship that was previously there between the fans and the board at the club. How he goes about that, I mean, that's above any of our pay grades. That's what he's been brought in to pay been paid the big bucks for. And all we can hope for is that this season is something that we can put behind us, and going forward, we'll see things improve across the board. Just like we managed to see Amy's tech improve before we came on air, and Kevin, you had some issues as well. So we're glad we got that all ironed out. And thank you very much for being the first guest on the AXOM Dial-In. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Cheers. Thanks for having me in again.
So Kevin will depart us, and very shortly we'll be joined by a second Kevin. It's Kevin Graham from Screamer Celica and from the AXOM Monday Club. Amy, that first one went okay, eh?
That's not too bad, yeah. It's a lot nicer when at least I know who Kevin is.
David Clarkson coming in with this. By the time this stream starts, Eddie Howe will be announced. Look, we started this stream early so that we could get all the technical issues out the road, and at 12:29 we were still trying to fight with them. So it was just good to get everyone on. Now, we've not tested Kevin Graham out, but let's see how he is when he comes into the stream. Kevin Graham, how's it going?
You're right, lads and ladies. What's up?
So, Amy, can you hear him?
I can hear Kev.
Can you hear? No, is it on mine? Kev, can you say something else?
How? What's happening here? Like,
no, we just got you. No, it's all good. It's all good, Kevin. We're just winding you up. Good to have you on. Nice bonnet. Liking it.
I know there's some folk thought I was missing and were worried about me last night. I heard that there was folk missing my dulcet tones, so I thought I would pop in.
I heard there was a bit of a search party being sent out, but after Russell took the wheel and not just behind his bus for a change, then it was good to have him on board. IH Decorating coming in saying, Celtic just pretend to be a big club, they sure don't act like one. Now Kevin, a big warm welcome to the Wednesday Dial-In. It's good to have you on. What's the point that you'd like to raise?
The point is, we're going into a post-COVID world now, and we've been a year without fans in the ground. There's a bit of a clamour for Celtic to offer some discount on season tickets next season, because they're maybe morally obliged to do it. Mm-hmm. It's probably the right thing to do. So Don Mackay sold the stadium name for Murrayfield. Mm-hmm. What would you actually think of Don Mackay selling the stadium name for Celtic Park to bridge the financial gap that we've had this season, and also to fund the rebuild?
Amy, I'll throw that one out to you. If Don Mackay, one of his first tasks was to sell the naming rights of Celtic Park, how do you think that would go down with the fans, considering what we just discussed about this disconnect between the board and the fan base? I'd
say no. I think I don't know. This is the worst I've ever heard anything sort of like this. I don't think I'd appreciate that at all.
So Kevin, obviously he's changed it to BT Murrayfield, so it's kept the Murrayfield name there. If you were looking to sort of sell the naming rights to a potential sponsor, I mean, I think it was been rumoured before that Guinness and things like that. Now, who would you be trying to target here, Kevin?
Okay.
I wouldn't be trying to target anybody, but I just think it would probably be a route that the PLC would go down. They would have a look at it, because they know the majority of the fans call Celtic Park Paradise, the Holy Ground, Parkhead. There's a whole list of names for it. So it would only really be for European nights. For example, I've often wondered why Fly Emirates haven't actually just moved across the road as well, because they've got the Fly Emirates Arena across the road from Celtic Park. And it's just one of these things. The PLC will always be looking of ways to make up the financial shortfall. Yeah. And for them, this might be seen as a simple way of doing it.
I think it's a very European thing as well. When you look across the leagues in Europe, especially the Bundesliga, 80% of stadiums in the Bundesliga actually are named after the sponsor. When you think about it, you've got Bayern with the Allianz and things like that. So I think maybe one of the only ones, and I might be wrong here, is Dortmund. Dortmund's isn't sold, I don't think. Maybe someone will be able to... No.
Not 100% sure.
Someone might be able to correct me on this, but I mean, our old friends at Duff and Phelps, they actually did a report into this back in 2019, and they suggested that the likes of your Barcelonas and Real Madrids would get somewhere in the region of £36.5 million a year to sell the naming rights to the stadium. Teams like Schalke and Porto, teams that we would say should be at Celtic's level, would get somewhere in the region of £3 to £7 million a year. Now, if you're talking about that over, say, a 4-year deal, averaging it at $5 million, you're talking £20 million. Amy, that's a big kind of input into Celtic's finances, considering the fact that we do rely heavily on things like ticket revenue coming in, season tickets. Having that additional couple of £1 million could be the difference of going out and getting your number one target. If that was put across to the fan base, that this is bridging the gap, this is helping to build the transfer kitty, would that be something that sweetens the deal?
I don't know. I'm really been thrown a curveball by this one. I get what you're saying. Like, I get it. Like, I really do. And like you say, you look across, like you say, Germany, and the majority, as you say, are, and I think Dortmund maybe is. It's I get it, but I just think the traditional fan base. I just think right now we're trying to go on about, like, the last off point with Kevin McCluskey was obviously fan engagement, and you're trying to keep the fans on board. I just think selling the name is massive. I know some people are saying that it's not big deals. At the end of the day, you can still call it what you want. How many people actually do call it BT Murrayfield? People do just refer to it as Murrayfield. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think I'm quite a traditionalist in that sense. I'm feeling a bit iffy about it.
Well, I mean, just on that point you just made there, people call it Murrayfield, they don't call it BT Murrayfield. So would you not just simply just call it Celtic Park? It doesn't matter. I mean, I guess it will matter the name of the company in front of it, and we'll get into that in a second, but if it was, say, as Kevin's saying, Emirates Celtic Park, would that make any difference to you? You'd just call it Celtic Park?
I don't know, I just think it would. I think right now, maybe because it's just been chucked at me, but I think it would take a while to get used to. I think it would.
So, Kevin, if you come back next week, Amy will give you an answer on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but we've just got the comment coming up here from the Urban Culture. If it's to happen, it would be amusing. If it's Sports Direct, I wouldn't be opposed, by the way. Now, I think it's something that would really split the fan base, but it does come back to the fact of picking the right partner here. Now, we've saw some PR disasters from the club over recent months. We spoke about it last week about the partnership with, is it Dahu International, the Chinese company, and I got slaughtered by someone saying that I was anti-Chinese, which was quite a ridiculous comment. But you also see things about Celtic putting out a tweet about a community partnership with a debt recovery agency. Now, it's coming away from the fact of what the club was founded on. It's coming away from the kind of morals of the club. So picking the right sponsor will be massive. And Gary Mesh comes in here to say, I've always called our home pitch Parkhead, not Celtic Park, so I don't have any issue with this at all. Now, Kevin, if we were to sort of try and put this out to Brian Walsh then correcting me saying it is the Signal Iduna. Yeah. Now, getting the right partner is going to be massive on this. If you get this wrong, it's another thing that could drive a big fork between the fans and the fan base, isn't it, Kevin?
It could, but then over the last 6-7 months, especially during this season, it's something I've always been against. It's something, it's just another bit of rampant commercialisation, which I don't want to see our club go down. But then over the last 6-7 months, I've seen a large proportion of their fan base want success at any cost. And if the club sold it to them, saying, well, this is one way that we're going to get to win the league again, I reckon a lot of fans would actually just turn the blind eye at it, like they turn the blind eye to a lot of things that the club do as long as we're winning on the park. And I don't think it would be that big a deal. It would be a big deal to me, but I would still call it Parkhead. I would. And it would only be when it's been on the TV, you would hear it getting called the Emirates Celtic Park, or whatever it would be called.
Bromsgrove Boy coming in here to say the PLC board is amoral. Sorry, I nearly got that wrong there. They don't represent or consider the fans' unbridgeable chasm. Now, this is going back to what I was saying. Getting the right partner will be massive on this. Now, if I look across Scottish football, the two that stick out is the Tony Macaroni Arena at Livingston, or the Spaghetti Ad, as it's been called, and the CBD Oil Stadium in Hamilton. Now, if that's the kind of sponsorships that can be gathered by teams in the league, who are we actually going to be targeting here? I would be against it if Celtic came out and said this is now called Daffabet Celtic Park. I think that's something that we shouldn't be trying to do. But when you look at it, having a big name like BT, then that's something that can help increase the sort of the reputation of the club by being able to get such a big sponsor like that in. I would say that you can attract these names, and when it comes round to potentially renewing the shirt sponsorships, renewing other sorts of sponsorships, then you would start moving away from the likes of your Daffabets and maybe trying to entice the big sort of corporations like BT into doing that. Sorry, Pat, I cannot pronounce your second name here, but he's coming in to say never rename Celtic Park, never ever ever. Now, Amy, this comes back to what Kevin was just saying there. You always call Celtic Park, but do you think this is going to split between the sort of the older fan base that have always known Celtic Park? What's this from producer Paul? Get Regatta, the logo can be on Parkas and Parkers. Paul's just put me off there, sorry. Going back to, do you think there'll be a sort of a difference in opinion between the older fan base that have known Celtic Park to be Celtic Park for as long as they know, and the sort of newer, I say newer, the sort of younger fan base that have grown up with the idea that Man City's called the Etihad, Arsenal Stadium's called the Emirates, you've got the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. It's just becoming a common thing in modern football that stadiums are now changed to be sponsored by a company?
Well, if that's the case, I'm totally against the mould. I don't want that. I think I take a bit of pride then. I think, I don't like the Emirates or the Etihad or the Allianz. Like you say, that's not really. I much prefer Celtic Park is Celtic Park or Parkhead or Paradise or whatever you want it to be. And I get that. What I'm saying is that if I go to Murrayfield, then I'm still going to Murrayfield. It's not BT Murrayfield. But technically it is BT Murrayfield, and if I'm writing a match report on a game at rugby, I have to say that I've been to BT Murrayfield. If I'm writing a match report on a game at Celtic, I don't want to be saying I've been to the Daffabet Celtic Park or whatever it may be. I'm not going. No, I disagree with you. I do. I'm not for it.
Taking your own personal thoughts out of it though, okay. Do you think it is a gap between the sort of traditionalist, the old school Celtic fans, and this new younger fan base that's coming through that would probably be more acceptable of Celtic changing the name to, say for example, BT Celtic Park? In
all honesty, I don't think so, because
no?
I think I know amongst my friends we mock Tony Macaroni Stadium. I just think I know
the spaghetti ad.
That's an easy one to mock, and maybe a poor example. But I don't think I think I'd much rather majority would. I've got two of my really good friends are Arsenal fans, and I know that they'd much prefer it wasn't the Emirates and they're still at Highbury. It's not. I think there's an assumption, perhaps, as you say, that maybe the younger generation would, because of the Etihad, the Emirates, would be more used to it. But I don't necessarily think that means that they would like it for ourselves, no.
Yeah, well, I'm not going down the line that it would be like, oh, this is a fantastic thing, but it's just like they would kind of accept the fact that this is just the way modern football is. Now, Robin M comes in on the point on modern football, saying if Axon wants Celtic to be successful, they have to move with modern football sponsorship. If you want to be like St Pauli, we'll have their morals, but then play League 2 football and no Europe. Now, I mean, before you even look at naming Celtic Park, you're still looking at a team that qualifies for Europe every season. Whether it be the Champions League, the Europa League or this new Conference League, Celtic will play in Europe pretty much 99 seasons out of 100. It's whether you want to progress in Europe, and that's all about the money that you generate in. And as Kevin said in his original point, this is trying to bridge the gap now because of the lost finances because of this period that we've lived through with the pandemic. So, I mean, for me, I wouldn't be against selling the naming rights to Celtic Park, but I really do think it's important to get the right partner in. And Kevin, given your own opinion on that, what do you think?
I'm kind of in Amy's camp here. I'm completely against it, and I want my cake and eat it. I want Celtic to be really, really moral and didn't sell their soul for money. But then I completely understand that the PLC board will sell their soul for money, and I just sometimes need to suck that up. And they will look at selling the stadium name. They will. It will be in a file somewhere. They will have looked at selling the stadium name, and it will be back on the table in the next year or so.
I think it'll be one of those plans that's in the big filing cabinet alongside buying Wimbledon, alongside joining the British Super League or the Atlantic League. It'll be one of the A to Z plans that might be pulled out once Dominic Mackay fully sits into his chair and picks his favourite tea and biscuit for the morning, as you boys have discussed on the Monday Club. But the point coming in here from John Caldwell, thought we were getting ordinary fans phoning in. Now, I would say, Kevin, you are a bit of an ordinary fan.
I'm an ordinary bloke.
But I guess what John's kind of alluding to is, so far we've had both Kevins that are regular contributors to A Celtic State of Mind. The next person that's going to be joining us actually hasn't been on A Celtic State of Mind before, but this is a trial of this. Is the first time that we've done this, so we're just building up a bank of regular contributors that are going to be calling in. If you're a regular to Clyde Super Scoreboard, you'll know Laurie from Denniston that's always joining them. There's always a kind of regular base, and it's important to get as many people to come across. So if you do want to get Zinkovic coming in, Kevin is an extraordinary fan. Depends on what you say about that.
Aye. Aye.
Kev, you went from being normal to extraordinary. Don't blow this one up. But if you do want to get involved on a Wednesday when we will be having people joining us, get in touch with Paul, get in touch with A Celtic State of Mind. We'll get the details and we'll work something out, and we'll have you on future shows, just like we've had Kevin on today. And Kevin, thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers, Kev. Oh.
2 down. How's it? It's producer Paul, he's so quick on the buttons. But yeah, Amy, 2 down. It's been some good conversation so far.
Yeah, I'm okay. That has thrown me, by the way. Really thrown me.
I want your answer next week. I want to know, and I want to know who you'd pick as a sponsor.
Tunnock's
Celtic Park. Free caramel wafer every time you come through.
That's all I'm thinking about.
So we have someone just about to join us here. We asked for a regular Celtic fan, and we have brought into the conversation Frank Cole. Frank, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
What do you make of that, regular Celtic fans? Are you a regular Celtic fan, Frank? Can you confirm that?
I would guess I am, yeah. I probably look as old as Laurie for Denison. Quite there yet, you know. Maybe start to sound like him just now.
And you can confirm you're a long-time viewer, first-time caller?
That's the one, yeah.
See, that's it. We've got the regular fans in, Amy, apparently. So, Frank...
Got the invite this morning, of course. Was well prepared, not.
Zinkovic just giving you a warm hail, so welcome to the conversation, Frank. Frank, you have your time to speak. What would you like to discuss today?
Well, one of the things I had to discuss was that when Neil Lennon left, you know, did we have a plan, or did we just hope it would get better? And that's what I think was the case.
Yeah, I mean, Amy, it's something we've discussed on here before. It's now, as we see going along on the screen, it's 70 days since Neil Lennon departed the club. I mean, the question should be asked is, would there have been much of a difference if Neil Lennon was still at the club now? Would things have changed that much?
Well, as Frank said, what has changed? We said it right at the top of the show. What is it for Kennedy? Is it 3 wins in 8 or something like that?
Yeah, 3 and 8, yep.
It's diabolical, and one will have been against Falkirk. Mm-hmm. That speaks for nothing. It's there has been no change. It's not even been the same. The team lineup hasn't changed. It's those basic things that could have shown a little bit of improvement. And as Frank says, if there was a plan in place, then it's literally as good a plan as me planning that I'm going to write an essay. It's just totally fell apart. That is not a stable plan put in place.
Well, let's not make that joke. I've still got a uni essay to submit on Monday and I've barely started it. But Frank, looking at it, I mean, as Amy said, it's 3 wins in 8 games. Have there been any changes to personnel, to tactics, to lineups that you've noticed since Neil Lennon left the club?
Absolutely not. Nothing obvious. I mean, there's no been any change in the approach, the tactics, the formation. I think the first team he picked was more or less a team that had played, you know, not long before it. And I think, although in fairness, I think in the first game it looked like there was a little bit more energy at first, and then it just sort of died away. And that's another thing that we've got a problem with this season, seems to be fitness. But no, nothing at all. And to be honest, there was a bit of an anticlimax, Neil Lennon leaving, because on the day it happened, or the night it was announced, it sort of gave you a little burst of energy that, something's happening, we're going to have a bit of change, there's still enough time to get something out of the season. But then it's just gone downhill, and nothing has happened, and it's very difficult as a fan to get motivated to even watch a game or to even bother logging on, but you do it out of duty. And Sunday, I mean, my God, that was a hard watch, you know. And my grass got cut after the third game, you know, that was it. You know, so there's been nothing at all. I think, getting back to the point I made, though, there was a lot of negativity about the club when Neil was there. And I think a lot of us were in the same boat, that his time had come, or that at least this had to be his last season. And there was a lot of horrible stuff on social media. There was that logo with Neil's face and the red line through it and getting pushed out. There was a fan protest. So I think the board done it to take heat off themselves, and I think they thought that negativity would go away. But clearly, they had no forward planning in place.
No, I think you're correct. And if I can throw this one out to you, Frank, do you think that the board waited far too long to make that decision, and that is because they didn't have a plan B ready to go?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. I mean, we all know that the decision should have been made, you know, probably October, November at the latest. And the thing was, the season was still salvageable at that time. Believe it or not, even in December, it still was in their own hands to win the league. You know, it's still there. It was still possible to win the league. There's still enough games, enough points to win it. So a change of manager would have been a massive positive, I think. Amy, you take a look at...
Sorry, Frank. Amy, you take a look at what happened across the league this season. I mean, Livingston getting rid of Gary Holt and replacing him with David Martindale, it certainly had that big boost. Now, we spoke at the time when Neil Lennon was departing the club. The question was always about who should follow him out the door. Should John Kennedy and Gavin Strachan also follow him out the door? Would you get a temporary manager in between now and the end of the season? Or would you just get the next permanent manager to come in? And it feels as though, and there was a point just brought up, I think it was Jungle Lion, he's called it Lennedy, because there doesn't seem to be much of a change between the way that John Kennedy and Neil Lennon had set out the teams. And Frank Arbuckle just coming in here just on the point that you raised, Frank, saying the board's plan for the whole season was to do nothing and hope things would get better, irresponsible and unacceptable. Now, going to Frank's point, Amy, the board didn't have a plan. They weren't ready to bring someone in between now and the end of the season. That's why John Kennedy got the job. And as I was saying, I think that's the reason why we waited so long to make this appointment. But for me, Neil Lennon could still be in that job and just announced that he was leaving at the end of the season. And the results that we've seen over the last 8 games, nothing would have changed.
Absolutely, and I think it was maybe Tony Haggerty who touched on it first. But if the board had confidence that Kennedy could have changed anything, then it'd have been long before. We're talking about January time then, obviously, there should have been mass changes put in place in October, November, of course, but not having Kennedy see it through to the season. But when the season was done and dusted in January, then if the board had that confidence in Kennedy that they could see change and that he could see it through till the end of the season, then it would have happened then, not in that week in February or whenever it was that Lennon did get relieved. There has been no change. Lennon is absolutely terrific. I think that's hilarious. That is fantastic because that is what it has been. We've said time and time again, however many games it was going to be that he got with the Scottish Cup run or whatever, there was an opportunity here. Let's the youngsters through. Let's shake things up a bit. Go back to a 4 at the back. Go to a 3 at the back. Just anything. Try and maybe establish a number 1 goalkeeper. Right? Maybe a has done that in Bain. Who really knows if it was the right call or not? Then that's another issue. But there has been no change. I think, as Frank says, I don't think there was any change in that. Kennedy's first starting 11 to maybe Lennon's. The fact that we're struggling to think of a name who's maybe came in under Kennedy, proves that there hasn't been like a big reshuffle. It's the same guys, it's the same rotation. If Turnbull start, Christie start, if Elyounoussi, whoever it may be, it's that same plethora of players that was at Lennon's dispense. I appreciate we've not got the biggest squad, but this is the time to be delving in and deepening into that youth setup. Let's bring all those guys through. Don't just have Montgomery sitting on the bench.
Absolutely. There must be more guys in the reserves or the youth team that could have come through, or we should have tried something. I mean, we all talk about Lee Griffiths, but Lee Griffiths brings goals. If Lee Griffiths plays, Celtic play different. Celtic play in the other half. They play in attacking. He buzzes about. the defenders have got to worry about someone else. He makes space, and whether he's fully fit or not, he's still a threat.
Yeah.
And I mean, we as the punters, we can see it, and you wonder why the professionals, the management team, can't see it. You know, it's so obvious, and it's a bit like they're finally starting to play Taylor at left back. I'm not saying he's perfect, but you could see Laxalt was, you know, a rabbit in the headlights half the time.
Yep.
But as I say, just getting back to my main point, they clearly didn't have a plan. And the season we're in now, even pre-COVID, next season was always going to be huge for Celtic, because if we'd got the 10, believe it or not, we would need to come up with something that motivated people to go for the next one, because it's almost like we've hit the target, we've got there, we've done it.
Yep.
The motivation's fallen away 1 year too early, clearly. And it was a big season for us. And Celtic board have got a huge job in their hands, because I don't know where the money's going to come from. Excuse me. Players have gone down in value. There'll be a hardcore season ticket holders will renew, because that's just the way it is.
Yep.
But this supposed waiting list with 15,000 people on it, well, that's going to get tested.
Well, I can clarify on that. That 15,000 season ticket list doesn't exist anymore. That was worked through this season. So if anyone goes to join, I think they're sitting at roughly around 2,000. So that just shows you how far it came down over this season, which is understandable considering the financial position a lot of fans found themselves in at the start of the season. Just bringing this point up, Paul Cunningham says Celtic board have to come out and talk to the fans. How or not, it's disgusting how they're treating the fans, and that's been the kind of current theme across all the points that's been raised today. But whilst you're here, Frank, I just want to ask you this point, right? We mentioned about the kind of youth players coming in. Kennedy's potentially going to have 2 games left. I mean, if we look at it, there's going to be a new manager, but I can't see him coming in for these last 2 games. Kennedy's going to get these last 2 games. What can be done different in these last 2 games? You mentioned the youth players. Is he going to try and change something up? We've spoke about him for the last week or so about being bold and going to Ibrox and actually having a go, but it doesn't seem as if that's going to be the case. What can he do in these last 2 games that he can kind of go out with the smallest bang?
Well, I think if there's players in the background, they'd get them in there. I mean, we had some players at the start of the season, Luca Connell and other players. I know it was pre-season. It was a game against Hibs. I think they played pre-season. Boy was outstanding, you know. And I'm one of your Celtic dads. I can remember at the end of the infamous John Barnes stroke Kendall.
Yes.
And we went to Tynecastle on the last day of the season, and Kendall we threw in all the boys. You just Simon Lynch's and all that. These boys, and at one point they were fighting over who would take a penalty, and I think they won 4-0 on the day. So
I think you've just got those 2 mixed up, so I just want to clarify that for someone that will come in and say it. 99-2000 season, we finished at home to Dundee United and we won 2-1 that day. The reason I remember that so vividly was that was my first game at Celtic Park. Okay. And Henrik Larsson came off the bench with a moustache on. That's producer Paul's favourite point. But I remember the one that you're talking about as well.
Yep.
That was after we'd won the league under Martin O'Neill. We went to Tynecastle and won 4-0. Sean Maloney scored 2 and Simon Lynch scored 2, and the 2 of them fought over the penalty. Right. And I believe Simon Lynch was given the penalty and missed it. Yeah. So it could have been a hat-trick for one of the 2 of them. But no, it's a good point. I'd love to see in the last game of the season, even the game, Scott Brown's farewell game as it's been put out to be against St Johnstone next Wednesday night. Now Luca Connell's loan deal at Queen's Park is finished, the league's finished. If he's available to be pulled into the squad, I'd love to see that. I'd like to see, like you mentioned, Amy, Adam Montgomery getting a chance, Dane Murray getting a chance, Karamoko Dembele. It is about time that we say these players that don't have a future at the club, then you've played your last game, that's it, see you later, and you actually give these boys a chance.
Listen, it counts for nothing. We don't want to lose, but it's not going to affect our league position, so it's not going to affect us for next year. They'll give the young boys a boost, they'll give the fans a boost, but what's in that youth set up, there seems to be a lot of guys want to leave as well, which is sad.
It's a really sad reflection. Just as Zinkovic brings up a sad reflection, oh God, the Barnes era, the stuff, a nightmare as well. I would say arguably this season's probably been the worst since the 99-2000 season, so that's us going back in time.
I agree, and sadly there's so many similarities, and Sunday at Ibrox was very reminiscent to us. I think we went there and lost 4-0 at the tail end of that season, and then Martin O'Neill came in, and he got some money to spend, but he also, like Rodgers did, he managed to get some players who were there playing a different way. He brought on Petrov, he brought on Bobby Petr. How bad was he until Martin O'Neill arrived? And all of a sudden he was a wonder player, wasn't he?
Yeah, definitely. That performance away at Ajax was outstanding.
Yeah, he put Mialbi from midfield into centre half. So things can happen. A new manager can look at things and get things out of players, but it's a massive rebuild. Massive.
Yeah, and it's one that we'll keep an eye on here at A Celtic State of Mind. Bromsgrove boy, just with the final point in this section, saying no succession planning whatsoever, a perfect storm, it's an omni-shambles, and that probably sums this up perfectly. And I think if you don't get your first choice manager, we might still be sitting as we get closer and closer to the league season asking who will take over the hot seat, but fingers crossed we do get our number one target over the line. Frank, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been great to have you on. Our first regular fan apparently.
Yeah.
But no, Frank, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll take care, and we'll hopefully speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Frank. There he goes. 3 down. That was a nice one. A Celtic da, as he called himself. But we went through 3 very important talking points today, and it does show that the Celtic fan base has a lot on their mind and what they want to discuss. And it goes back to the point that we're saying, the disconnect between the fans and the club. Are the club actually aware that these are the thoughts that's on fans' minds right now? Do they know what is potentially stopping someone from putting their hand in their pocket and renewing their season book this year? There's a lot of these things that I don't think the board are actually listening to the fan base.
I think they're picking and choosing when they listen, but then again, if they're not hearing this right now, and the general voices of Celtic fans across the board, then what are they listening to? It's worrying if they're not picking up on things like this. It certainly is, and we spoke about it before, but there's no way that there's nobody at the club not watching Axom or any of the other top class Celtic podcasts that are kicking around. So
yeah, a point coming in here from Maravchik25. It's discussing the kind of regression that we've seen. Look at Man City last night compared with them. We competed with them twice just 5 years ago. Last night they'd have taken 10 off us. Now, not on that point, but there was a picture I saw on social media over the weekend, and it compared the first Celtic team that Peter Lawwell put out again. Well, I say Peter Lawwell put out, he doesn't really pick a team, or maybe he does pick a team, who knows. But when Celtic played in the first Glasgow derby, this was the Celtic team it was, compared to the team that started the game on Sunday. And it just shows you the difference in class of some of those players. We're talking about guys like Hartson, Sutton, Larson, Mialbi, Lambert, and then compare it to some of the ones that played on Sunday, and it's just like
that comparison. Yeah,
it's a really sad reflection. But one of the players that did play on Sunday, or actually came off the bench, was Ryan Christie, and Alan Morrison's coming in here to tell us why we should keep him on for the foreseeable future. Alan, you know that Ryan Christie's my trigger word, so you're going to have a big job on your hands here, but you're the man with the stats, so let's hear it.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on, and hi everybody. Yeah, so listen, Ryan Christie has become the latest sort of lightning rod, I suppose, for a lot of frustration. It does seem to, fan frustration does tend to kind of linger around a certain player. Believe it or not that long ago it was James Forrest, who of course is now one of the greatest players in the world by dint of the fact he doesn't play because he's been injured, and therefore his greatness just elevates, of course. And Christie really has become that, as I say, that lightning rod. I think it's probably it seems like a couple of reasons. One is there seems to be a lot of chatter that perhaps, is he looking to move on? We don't know. I don't know that. I don't have any inside information on that. And then the second is from a performance perspective, this perception that, especially around long shooting, that, he makes terrible choices and so forth. And actually, I'm going to start by saying that, compared to last season when Christie was absolutely outstanding, he has regressed terribly on most of the key stats, and that is clear. I'm not going to sort of try and butter that up any other way. He's down in terms of his expected goals, his expected assists, his actual contribution is even less than is expected, if you see what I mean. So not only is he producing less, the choices he's making aren't necessarily good ones either. So I'm not going to kind of butter that up.
You're talking my language, Alan. Just keep talking.
and I just wanted to touch on the long shooting thing, because I think that's become a bit of a cause célèbre against people, from people who want to kind of stick the boot into Christie. The reality is that last season he scored 8 goals from outside the box. Now, I would challenge you, and about somebody who can do a quick bit of Googling, I don't know if there'd be another midfielder in Europe that would actually have scored 8 goals from outside the box, other than perhaps a Messi, probably. 8 goals from outside the box is quite a strong achievement. In terms of, if you look at his expected goals, that would have said he should have scored about 3 from those efforts. So what he did, of course, was massively overachieve compared to what the expected goal model would say he should do. And guess what? This season he scored 5 from outside the box. So actually not that many less. And his expected goals is, guess what? 3. So these are really small margins. And he is taking more shots from outside the box, but it's up about 4% than what it was last season. So that small marginal increase in the number of shots he's taking, and the fact that he's been slightly less successful, albeit he's over exceeding what he would be expected to do, is quite an interesting factual background to build this model that his decision making is uniformly rubbish, when the reality is it's not actually that much different to last season. It's just that a few more went in, and therefore our perception is that very different based on that.
Amy, I think most people that watch on a Wednesday know my thoughts on Ryan Christie, so I'll throw it out to you. What have you thought of Christie's performances for Celtic this season? Has it just been a one-season dip, or was last season the you know the word I was going to say?
Do I know?
The exception to the rule, and he just had a very good season last year, and this is him back playing at the level that we expect of him.
Yeah, it's not easy, obviously. As Alan's highlighted there, that last season was astronomical. Do you know what I mean? They are ridiculous stats, they really are. But this season, I think he's been so blown apart, and I'm not even just meaning. I understand the stats are there, and I'm not going to argue with them. But it's more his mentality that's got me this season, and his attitude. That's what's got me. You look at him score a goal and he's not fussed. There's no celebrations. I understand the fans aren't there, but I just don't think that he's happy anymore. And I think at the end of the day, you don't keep a player that's not happy at the club. He's always made it very clear, as is his dad, that progression is needed, and they've got massive expectations and want to broaden horizons and all of that sort of jazz. Basically, he wants to play in the Premier League, but. So I think you allow that, because he's not happy. He's not playing with the same sort of enthusiasm. There just doesn't look like there's that sort of connection that was there. I think he has become the whipping boy. He absolutely has. I think James Forrest coped with it. I don't think Ryan Christie does. I don't think that he likes being the whipping boy. Maybe James Forrest is a little bit quieter, a little bit calmer, and he still knows that he's got it in his locker and that he can produce. He knows maybe he's got a better support network around him. Who knows? But I just think that Celtic and Ryan Christie don't go together as well anymore. I think James Forrest and Celtic have always went well together. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. But I don't think Ryan Christie and Celtic going forward are a good partnership anymore.
Now, Alan, if we look at it, Christie only has 6 months left on his deal. Technically, as of this summer, he could go out and negotiate a deal where he moves in the January transfer window. It's not a fact of Celtic not trying to tie him down. Celtic have offered him contract talks time and time again, and they've either broken down or they've just not been accepted. So what would be the difference to keep Ryan Christie at the club this summer? What do you think that it is that he's looking for? Or is it just the fact that maybe he is kind of winding down his deal, knowing that he's going to move away?
Yeah, I don't, honestly, I've got no insight into how he's thinking. I don't know the politics of it or the perceived facts of it. You could easily argue, just by plucking a perception out there, that he's waiting to see who the new manager is and the style of play and all manner of things. All I can look at, I don't know how he's feeling. I don't know how happy he is when he gets up in the morning. I don't know what cereal he has. I don't know whether he had a good shower or a bad shower.
Is that not part of the analytics? No.
What came on the radio that morning?
Expected Weetabix.
Exactly. How did that affect his mood? All I can go on are his performances on the park, right? And I don't measure the height of his eyebrow, whether he's looking a bit displeased when he put one in, or not celebrating quite as much as he should have. But all I know is, if you look across, I would say first thing is, absolutely his form has dipped. Yes, last season was a very tough one for him to emulate, but I've not done the full kind of squad analysis yet, but I think we can all see that there's virtually nobody whose numbers, are not significantly worse than they were last season, because he's playing in a fundamentally flawed midfield system, which we don't want to get into in this call particularly, but that is the fundamental problem. He is a player who has, apart from that first run of games when he broke into the team after that Hearts semi-final, and he played 11 games as a box-to-box 8 in a midfield 3. Since then, he's never played more than 4 games in the same position. He often plays in a different position in the same game. So I think that you've got to factor that in. But he's still. I'm going to throw a few stats at you because that's what I'm all about. He's still the first in the squad in what I call packing stats, which is stats measure your ability to break lines with passes. He's ranked 1 there. He's second to El Yunusi in challenges 1 of midfielders and forwards. He's second to Ajeti, believe it or not, in drawing fouls. He's the top midfielder for interceptions. He's only behind Forrest for making progressive runs. He's only second to Turnbull in passes that he makes into the danger area, which is the area in front of goal. He's third in the squad in assists. I could go on and on and on. The point I'm making is that Christie contributes to a high level on such a range of metrics. The way I would characterise him is he's not as defensively strong as Scott Brown, but he's probably second. He's not as creative as Turnbull, but he's probably second. He's not as much of a goal threat as Forrest. He's probably second. He can contribute to the full range of skill sets that you want from a midfielder, and that's why I would move heaven and earth to keep him.
Looking at that, and it's someone that you brought up in there, and I wonder if that is the difference between the performances this season, and it's the performances of David Turnbull. Now, I think a lot of fans, when they look at it, without looking at any of the stats, would suggest that the contribution that you're receiving from David Turnbull is what you actually got from Ryan Christie last season in terms of goals, shots from outside the box, assists, things like that. Is it then the struggle, Alan, to try and play 2 very similar players in Turnbull and Christie in the same side, considering the sort of formation that Celtic play?
No, I disagree just in the sense that I would say they're similar. I think they're very different. And actually, this is again another reason why I would definitely have Christie. You saw it on Sunday. I mean, who thought that starting a midfield of Turnbull, McGregor, and Brown would have anything close to the physicality and aggression and running power to keep up with that midfield? Because whatever you think of them, Aribo, Kamara, Kent, Roof, they've got good energy, they're strong, they're physical, they get up and down. And who thought that midfield would be able to cope with that? It's the same if you'd swap Broderick in. So what Christie gives you and what Sorrell gives you is more intensity, more defensive cover, and more ability to win the ball back, which Turnbull doesn't really have. Turnbull's not a particularly quick player. He's not fast over the ground. His defensive play is fairly average. He's more of a traditional 10. Christie's more of what I'd call an 8, a box to box. And if you had a midfield on Sunday of McGregor holding between the Christie or a Sorrell holding, between McGregor and Christie playing in those 8 positions, that's a pretty decent midfield that carries goal threat. You can get the ball forward. They can run with the ball. They're going to break lines, and also they can get back and do the dirty stuff as well. And so I think you can absolutely play those 2 players in the same team, Christie and Turnbull. They do very different roles.
Yeah, and Amy, looking at it, we just mentioned he's got 6 months left in his deal. The stats that Alan's producing, they're very impressive, and it kind of gives you a different option to the way that we look at football. I mean, we look at Christie's performances this season, we'll say they're far below par. But as Alan's saying, he's maybe only second to the best player in the team. I mean, you're talking about second to Turnbull, second to Forrest, things like that. So, although he's not leading the stats, he is up there and he is producing. Kevin Graham's coming in here saying Christie will wait until the last minute to make a decision after the Euros. He'll be hoping for a few good games for Scotland, and we'll see mid-table EPL sides coming in for him. Now, if you read the reports in the newspapers, the teams that are in for him at the minute are Norwich and Burnley. Now, he was linked with Burnley last summer, and that didn't go ahead. Do you think Ryan Christie's looking for that kind of move, or is he looking at maybe his friend and Stuart Armstrong, or maybe even Kieran Tierney, to think that I don't want to go to that sort of team, I want to go to that kind of bigger team, and if that bigger team doesn't come along, then a contract extension at Celtic would be his second option?
There is that pathway. There has to be, obviously. It was well documented how close he is with Armstrong and Tierney alike. So it's natural. You see your pal doing well, of course you're going to think, right, why can't I do that? What's he got that I've not? What's Armstrong doing that Christie's not? And yeah, of course, Armstrong left on the back of a tremendous season at Celtic, not just a tremendous career, but his final season at Celtic was top notch. In comparison to Christie's, it quite hasn't been. I think the big thing there, I do agree with Kev. I can see him potentially trying to do that with the Euros, but you look at back in, November, so qualify for the Euros, you're looking right, Steve Clarke, there is no way that he could not start Ryan Christie in the Euros in the summer. You look right now, you look at that Scotland setup, do you think that Ryan Christie is going to be a starter? Those last 4 games, I think he maybe started 1 game for his country. There are players ahead of him now. The system hasn't changed dramatically. If McTominay, obviously, if he moves into midfield, Shea Adams is a new dimension, right? Ryan Fraser's back in the fold, so things are changing. But even right now, Christie, everything that's went wrong basically at Celtic over the last 6 months has had a huge detrimental effect on his Scotland career as well. Now you're looking at that's 26-man team now going to the Euros that hasn't.
It's confirmed.
If David Turnbull's not a part of that, then that's a different issue, but it looks, it has to be a near guarantee that he's going to be one of those additional names. It'll be frightening if he's not. Now, right now, can you really be picking Christie ahead of his teammate when his team in the Scotland setup, when in Celtic Turnbull's getting the nod ahead of Christie? There's a lot of dimensions there, so it's been a tricky period, but I can see him trying to hold out for that bigger club move. I don't see, we're talking about him that he's wanting that sort of progression and he's wanting that next big step. Is a Burnley, and no disrespect to Burnley, and is a Norwich will most likely be battling relegation, or they'll be in that bottom half. Who knows? Maybe they won't be. Maybe they'll do they'll do a Sheffield United the last year and totally run away. But it's not going to, as you see, that sort of typical, Southampton or that more mid-range sort of table league side. So I can see him potentially holding out for that, because he does. He's got that little bit. We all talk about that little bit of arrogance that he's got as well. He'll see that he has the ability and the capabilities to go to a side like that.
Yeah, definitely, and that's a really good point. It's kind of what is his options come the summer, and as I said, I think he'll struggle to get in that Scotland team up front. You look at guys like John McGinn, you'd think Callum McGregor would probably get in there ahead of him at the minute. James Forrest coming back into it, Ryan Fraser, all these guys you mentioned. If you move McTominay up into centre mid, there's certainly a lot of options to play in that role, and Steve Clarke's got his favourites as well. You see guys like McLean being called up from Norwich, and as you mentioned, Turnbull as well. So Christie will have to do well to get in that team, and I'm sure that's what he'll be working on in the squads. Highland Paddy 2 coming in saying, Celtic, get Alan in, get the laptop boy out. The laptop boy, I think you're referring to Gavin Strachan. It's an easy target to have a go at the laptop. I got some abuse for saying this is modern football. It's like, look, we agree with the stats. We know that's the future of football, but when someone's doing their job poorly and it looks as if they're relying on a computer, it's an easy target. It's a quick joke. It's not something that's serious. Look at the amount of abuse that the boy at Hearts got when he took over, because it was down as the sort of football manager. It was himself and Austin McPhee. His name's totally slipped my mind.
Ian Cathro.
Ian Cathro, that's the name. But sorry, Alan, getting back to talking about Strachan, Kennedy and Lennon, that has been a major talking point of Celtic's performances this season, is that so many players have regressed, and the question has been why. Now, for a lot of people, they'll say it comes down to the coaching behind the scenes. When Celtic appoint this new manager, if it is someone like Eddie Howe, is that the kind of rebirth for a lot of these players? Say Ryan Christie was to sign a new deal and was to be there next season, is that what he is needing in his career right now to develop him back to the level that he was at? Is actually the coaching team behind the scenes, and that when we look at this season we go, well, it's got a lot to do with what was happening off the park instead of on it.
Yeah, I maybe of me choosing to be optimistic, but as quickly as things have unravelled, I think things can turn the other way. It wasn't that long ago that pretty much the same group of players at Ibrox would have been pelted with tomatoes off the pitch, losing at home to Hamilton and to Hearts in in the Cup, the same management team were wanting to get chased. Things can change very quickly, and Celtic have absolutely been the authors of their own downfall. And can many of those same group of players, turn around and actually perform better? I think they can. The absolute, the gaping gap in central midfield is the biggest issue. And if you solve that one problem, then you're going to go a long way to helping the rest of the structure, because the having to cover that central midfield position has a hugely detrimental impact on Callum McGregor's game for a start. And seeing him having to cover defensively, he gets into fangles like he got into on Sunday, where he's making ridiculous tackles at the edge of the box because Brown isn't quick enough.
Yeah, he's covering far too many positions. Yeah. The lack of ability, the lack of recruitment to fill that sixth position and the two fullback positions have had a massive impact. As have the decisions made in recruitment this season around picking players that were wholly unsuitable to the way that Celtic play, and the players like Laxalt and Duffy were just absolutely unsuitable to Celtic style and of what they were trying to achieve. And there was nothing in the data, nothing in their performances that would have suggested they would fit in to the way that Celtic wanted to play. So yes, these things are recoverable. I think you have got a core, albeit it's a dwindling core of players. That Julian, it wasn't even mentioned in I think any of the last three derby matches that Christopher Julian is been missing. He's an absolutely massive miss all season, because that Julian Ayer partnership is the most effective, statistically most effective, since Denier and Van Dijk played together for a season. So it was absolutely massive. And then, of course, the goalkeeping debacle. So all of those things are fixable. Now, can they all be fixed in the short term? We don't know. But there's certainly, I think, just some basic organisation. I think the point that you made earlier, Amy, about fitness, to me is absolutely massive. If you look at Celtic's performances in games, chances come in clusters. There's no sort of sustained pressure. There's no sustained, and also then the substitutions are absolutely bewildering. They were under Lennon, and they're continuing to be under Kennedy. Those things can all be fixed with the right people in charge, I think. I don't know if you saw just before you came on, Alan, but someone has coined the phrase Lenedy, because nothing much has really changed. But Amy, it's a really interesting point about this rebuild that's coming up in the summer. Now, a lot of comments come in saying Celtic need 12, 15, so many different players in the summer, and I think everyone's kind of accepting the fact that this isn't going to be done in one transfer window. But for me, what you've got to look at perhaps going back to when Brendan Rodgers took over at the club. Now, he only brought in, I think it was 5 or 6 players in that first transfer window, but he brought on so many players that were already there, players that we thought were going to depart the club, guys like James Forrest, whose contract was pretty much running down, and then he re-signed the deal. So when you look at players like Ryan Christie, if he was to stay, James Forrest, even Greg Taylor, Callum McGregor, even Albion Ayeti, you're looking to try and get a tune out of maybe 5 or 6 of these players, and then bring 5 or 6 in to supplement it, so that eventually, whoever the new manager will be, whether it be Eddie Howe, whether it be whoever, will get his own team that he wants. But it is a building blocks, and you can't just throw everything together at once. It's going to take time to get there. Yeah,
it's going to take time, and yeah, absolutely, we have to look at from within as well. But I think going back to, as you see, even with Rodgers, and you're looking at it right now, I think at the end of the day, we can talk about stats, and we absolutely can, if performance has been there this season or not. But if the conundrum, even Forrest with Rodgers and Christie, if that's what we're drawing up on, Forrest with Rodgers and Christie with whoever, and this may be, Forrest wanted to be at Celtic. You could see that he still wanted to be at Celtic. I don't see 1 inch of Ryan Christie that wants to be at Celtic, and the player has to be happy. There is no point in having a player in this team, in this squad, in this setup, in this rebuild, in any sort of transition, if he doesn't want to be here. If he's going to run down his contract till January and totally run it down and leave the club for nothing for him, then there is no point in having him for these 6 months. Like I said, his performances this season, and I'm not drawn into that whole however many poor shots or whatever from outside the box, because as Al's alluded to, he does right, I understand. Obviously, there's the jokes and whatever, but he can score from outside the box. He absolutely can, and I'd like to see many others do it, and they aren't. But I don't see a single bit of him that in his performance, in his attitude, in anything, in celebrations, that he wants to be at the club. And for me, that's the biggest thing. If a player wants to be there, fine. That's when you can get a tune out of him, get a development. Hence why I thought Rodgers could get something out of Forrest. I could still see it maybe happening with McGregor right now. Can see Taylor. You can get a tune out of Taylor. He wants to be at Celtic. You listen to him talk. He wants to play for Celtic. I'd like to hope McGregor still does. Forrest, I think he's more than comfortable. He's in a comfort zone, and you look at how he's worked on his rehabilitation this season. It looks like he's wanting and raring to go to get back. Christie, on the other hand, I don't see it. I don't.
So it's just going to end. I'm going to kind of finish this up with a simple question, and it's probably a one-word answer. If the option was there to extend Ryan Christie's contract by a further 12 months, should the club take it? No. Alan?
Yes, I do agree with Amy. Sorry, I know you wanted one word. I do agree with it. Obviously, if a player doesn't physically, really doesn't want to be there, then we've seen what happened with the Dembele and Boyata debacles. That it's counterproductive for everybody to be in that situation. So I would agree. If he wants to go, fair enough. I just think maybe who someone that I know likes Christie could persuade him to stay for the right reasons in a positive sense. Then I would be for that. Yeah.
So it'll be an interesting one to see what happens with Ryan Christie. I think it will come down to performances at the Euros, as Kevin Graham mentioned, and then what options lie there in front of him. Perhaps also with a new manager coming in, as you mentioned, Alan, if it is Eddie Howe, you've seen what he's done with Ryan Fraser down at Bournemouth. Perhaps you could get the same sort of thing out of Ryan Christie if he was to stay. But it'll be one that we'll keep an eye on A Celtic State of Mind. And Alan, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a great contribution, a great discussion. I didn't get that triggered around Ryan Christie, so you obviously done a great job.
I didn't actually, did I? I'll try harder next time.
Thanks for joining us, Alan.
All right, take care.
Take care. So, Amy, we've got through it. It is the first AXOM dialing. That didn't go too bad, eh?
I went okay. I'll come back next week.
Well, when you do come back next week, I do want to know who your sponsor is going to be for the stadium.
I will think about this.
That should be all you think about for the next week.
Don't worry, I'm on it.
If you've enjoyed watching that today and you want to get involved, do get in touch with Paul, and he'll set that up for you to get involved next week. You can join me and Amy and discuss anything that you like about Celtic, past, present or future. I'm sure there's plenty to discuss. John Paul Mason and Declan McConville join Paul John Dykes tomorrow on the 12:30 Bulletin. I'd been on a good run until this week. It's put me off. But they'll be back tomorrow at 12:30 to discuss everything else that's happening in the world of Celtic. It's been great to have you all here. Please do continue to get involved on the social media platforms. We're on Facebook. I think our Facebook group's sitting at just close to 7,500 members, so do get involved there. On YouTube, it's getting closer to 11,500 subscribers, so we're getting there. And as always, you can follow us on Twitter. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind today. As always, take care, stay safe, and a massive hail hail.